Tonight, we journey deep into the shadows of time to uncover the mysteries of lost civilizations, Atlantis, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. Stories carved in stone, whispered by the sea, and buried beneath the sands. And if you enjoy traveling with me through these forgotten worlds, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, so together, we can keep exploring the secrets of history, legends, and ruins, tales of three lost civilizations. In the hush of legend, ancient storytellers spoke of mighty peoples and cities swallowed by time. Some were pure myth, like the fabled island of Atlantis. Others were real lands, whose grandeur faded from memory, the cities, between the Tigris and Euphrates, and the great cities on the Indus River. Our tale weaves between myth and archaeology. We'll start with Atlantis, the lost empire of legend, then journey to Mesopotamia, the real cradle of civilization, and finally to the Indus Valley cities discovered in the 20th century. At every turn we'll note what ancient writers claimed, according to legend, and what modern excavation and scholarship have shown. Archaeologists. Atlantis, the sunken empire of legend. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules lies a magnificent island. The tale goes, an empire of gleaming temples and mighty fleets, more vast than Asia Minor and Libya combined. These words come not from a modern travel guide, but from Plato, writing in the 4th century BCE. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato relates a story told by Egyptian priests about 9,000 years before Solon's day. They claimed a powerful civilization called Atlantis ruled the Western Sea. According to the priests, Atlantis was a great island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, today's Strait of Gibraltar, an advanced kingdom of concentric marble palaces, canals, and temples. Its warriors at one point even threatened ancient Athens. But in Plato's narrative, the Atlanteans grew wicked and impious, and the gods punished them. In one night of storms and earthquakes, their entire island plunged beneath the waves. According to legend, then, Atlantis was a cautionary tale of hubris. Plato describes it richly: golden temples, circling waterways, a metal called orichalcum glowing on palace walls, but provides no physical evidence. Modern scholars are skeptical. As one commentator notes, it's debatable whether Atlantis even existed. Indeed, for 2 millennia, no archaeological site matching Atlantis has been found anywhere in the Atlantic or Mediterranean. Historians today regard Plato's account largely as allegory or myth, not literal history. A clever moral story, told at a time when Athens wanted to teach virtue by example, might explain why Plato gave such exacting detail despite its implausible date. Still, the legend of Atlantis has echoed through ages. Renaissance and later writers wildly speculated it might lie under ocean, waves off Spain, Greenland, or even the Caribbean. For example, one 2023 expedition claimed to discover Atlantis in sunken ruins off the Spanish coast, complete with alleged towers and temples, but most archaeologists dismissed such claims as wishful thinking. As Ken Feder quipped about modern Atlantis hunters, extraordinary claims must prove themselves. Plato himself said nothing of Atlantis's fate except mythic retribution, and archaeology has revealed no lost continent matching Atlantis's grandeur. However, some scholars look for kernels of truth behind the myth. Could an ancient disaster have inspired Plato's story? Geology offers a clue. Around 1500 BCE, the island of Thera, Santorini, in the Aegean exploded in one of history's greatest volcanic eruptions. That blast triggered tsunamis that devastated Crete and coastal lands. Some researchers suggest news of that disaster, preserved in Egyptian records, may have traveled westward, transforming over centuries into the story of Atlantis. Britannica even remarks that the Atlantis tale may in fact reflect Egyptian records of a volcanic eruption on Thera about 1500 BCE, which shattered Bronze Age societies and possibly in this way, the myth of Atlantis intertwines with real catastrophe. According to legend, the island kingdom sank as divine punishment, but archaeology shows there was a terrible Minoan-era eruption that could be the seed of the tale, though no civilization as described by Plato has been found. Thus the saga of Atlantis remains half enchanting fable, half unanswered question. According to Plato, a paradise empire vanished beneath the sea as punishment. Archaeologists have found, by contrast, no sunken Atlantean city, only an earth-shattering volcano and a story that warns how riches and pride can lead to doom. Mesopotamia, cradle of civilization. Now we turn east to where history truly begins. The word Mesopotamia comes from Greek for between rivers, the fertile floodplain of the Tigris and Euphrates, largely modern Iraq. Here, millennia before Plato's time, a succession of real cultures built some of the world's first cities. The landscape was harsh, a flat alluvial plain hot and dry for much of the year, but the rivers provided life. In fact, Britannica notes that agriculture only thrived here after people built irrigation canals. Artificial irrigation had been invented, so southern Mesopotamia became a land of plenty that could support a considerable population. In other words, by about 6000 to 5000 BCE, farmers were turning the floodplain green with barley and wheat through an ingenious network of canals and dikes. From those fields arose the first cities. By around 3500 BCE, settlements like Eridu, Uruk, and Ur had become true cities, some with tens of thousands of residents. Uruk, for example, is often called the world's first city. These Sumerian cities were crowned by towering ziggurats, massive temple mounds of sun-dried brick. Excavations at Ur, the Sumerian city of Nana, uncovered one of these great ziggurats, a three-tiered mud brick pyramid about 210 by 150 feet at the base and roughly 12 meters high, crowned by a shrine to the moon god. Remarkably, 3rd millennium Sumerian architects even mastered advanced techniques. Archaeologists note that ziggurat walls were built with slight, convex curves, entasis, and that they knew about arches and vaults long before classical Greece. Along with monumental architecture, the Sumerians gave the world many inventions. They invented writing, the very first known writing system. Around 3000 BCE, scribes began pressing reeds into clay tablets to make pictographs for counting goods. These pictographic tokens soon gave way to cuneiform script, wedge-shaped signs recording Sumerian words. The earliest cuneiform tablets we have are simple accounts of livestock and grain. From Uruk, over centuries this script evolved from pictures into a complex writing system expressing abstract ideas. With it came literature and record-keeping. For example, fragments of the Epic of Gilgamesh and the names of Sumerian kings survive on tablets. Cuneiform would last for millennia, used by Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and others. The Sumerians also advanced mathematics. They adopted a base, 60-number system. Yes, the reason an hour has 60 minutes and a circle 360 degrees. As Britannica records, base 60 originated with the ancient Sumerians in the 3rd millennium BC and was passed down to the Babylonians. We still see its legacy in how we divide time and angles. Sumerian scribes used this system to calculate areas of fields and track the heavens. In fact, early astronomy grew here. Priests charted the stars on tablets for calendars and omens. City life in Mesopotamia was complex. The Sumerian economy used trade and standardized measures across city-states. Archaeologists have found weights and measures that were uniform across hundreds of miles, an early sign of centralized control. Craftsmen there could produce fine jewelry and painted pottery. Even the wheel appears first in Mesopotamia. Archaeologists note that the potter's wheel was invented by Sumerians around 4000 BCE, a stepping stone to the later wheel and axle carts. People in these cities lived in mud brick houses around courtyards, worshipping temple gods in grand ziggurats. Around 2400 BCE, an ambitious leader named Sargon of Akkad rose to power. For centuries he was nearly a legend, almost mythical, but archaeologists confirmed his reality. Fragments of inscriptions at Ur show Sargon really did live and unite Mesopotamia under one empire. In Sargon's wake came successive empires. By the 18th century BCE, Babylon was supreme under King Hammurabi, whose famous law code survives etched on stone. The Code of Hammurabi, circa 1790 BCE, is the oldest known complete. Law Code 282. Case laws carved on a black diorite stele. These laws cover commerce, family, theft, and even retribution. It explicitly endorses the lex talionis, an eye for an eye, in many punishments. The code was advanced for its time, integrating Babylonian, Akkadian, and older Sumerian customs and applying them across a whole kingdom. A traveler today could see the stele of Hammurabi, with its image of the king receiving law from the sun god, in the Louvre Museum. Mesopotamia knew further empires. In the 7th century BCE, the Assyrians, based at Nineveh, created a vast but brutal empire. Fortunately, their scribes preserved what they knew. King Ashurbanipal reigned 669 to 631 BCE, amassed a royal library of some 30,000 clay tablets at Nineveh. Modern archaeologists excavated these in the 19th century, now housed mostly in the British Museum. These tablets are the richest source on Assyrian life. As a British Museum curator notes, they tell the Assyrians' story in their own words, everything from royal inscriptions and intelligence, reports to medical handbooks, hymns, and the flood story of Gilgamesh. In other words, thousands of tablets from Ashurbanipal's library let us listen in on ancient Mesopotamian civilization as a living culture. But all empires fade. By 612 BCE, the Assyrian capital Nineveh fell to a coalition of Babylonians and Medes. A few decades later, 539 BCE, Babylon itself was conquered by Cyrus the Persian. The once great cities became ruins. Still, their legacy endures. Cuneiform tablets and monuments have preserved Sumerian, Akkadian, and other languages. The inventions, writing, law, irrigation, spread across the world. The very term Mesopotamia was revived by modern scholars precisely because, as Britannica explains, this land in southwestern Asia is where the world's earliest civilization developed. Archaeological digs are still uncovering more. For example, the ziggurat of Ur and the royal tombs of Ur3, c.2100 BCE, yielded astonishing treasures of gold and lapis that astounded their 20th century discoverers. Each dig deepens our understanding of these ancient peoples. We speak of Indus script, but much remains mysterious because no one can read it. Across Harappan sites, archaeologists have found over 4,000 short inscriptions on seals and pottery fragments, written in a script of perhaps 400 pictographic signs, but they are usually only a few symbols long. Modern scholarship, as Britannica explains, emphasizes that the Indus script remains undeciphered because of the brevity of the inscriptions and the lack of bilingual texts. Without a Rosetta Stone, the language behind the script is unknown. Thus, the Harappans remain partly in prehistory. We see their crafts and cities, but we can only guess at their words and beliefs. This is why experts say we know far less about their society than about contemporary Mesopotamia. What did the Indus people eat and grow? Archaeology tells us they farmed wheat, barley, peas, sesame, and other crops. They also grew cotton, indeed. The Indus civilization has the earliest recorded evidence of cotton cultivation. They kept cattle, sheep, goats, and dogs, and possibly domesticated elephants. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, they worshipped no giant gods in awe-inspiring temples. No signs of pharaoh-like rulers, but objects like carved mother goddess figurines and animals, especially the Zebu bull, appear in terracotta. Daily life was likely centered on the family, craftsmanship, and trade. By about 2000 BCE, the great Harappan cities suddenly went into decline. Archaeologists find that by 1700 to 1600 BCE, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were largely abandoned. The reasons are still debated. Some evidence points to climate change. Perhaps the monsoon rains that fed the Indus gradually weakened, and rivers like the Ghaggar Hakra dried up or shifted course. At Mohenjo-Daro itself, the city was actually hit repeatedly by flooding in its last centuries of occupation. Eventually, invaders, perhaps Indo-Aryan tribes from the northwest, may have dealt a final blow to the urban centers. Britannica bluntly states that by the middle of the second millennium BCE, the city of Mohenjo-Daro was already dying and was dealt a final blow by invaders from the north. Some Harappan outposts in the south survived longer, perhaps merging into later cultures. But the Grand Indus cities were never rebuilt. By 1500 BCE, the civilization as it was known was over. Despite this collapse, the legacy of the Indus Valley lived on in bits and pieces. Its urban innovations, brick streets, baths, storage granaries, vanished from archaeological record, but its memory inspired successive generations. The Indus site of Nalanda, India, had Harappan pottery below Buddhist ruins, showing continuity of settlement. The script vanished, leaving no direct descendants. Today we honor it by name. UNESCO has declared Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa World Heritage Sites, and the ongoing excavations, even now in 2025, continue to reveal new Harappan houses, seals, and artifacts. Each discovery fills in the picture. For example, the brick workshops, bead factories, or tombs found at newer Harappan sites like Lathau, Gujarat, or Rakhigarhi, Haryana, Indus Valley, the Harappan civilization. From the Mesopotamian plain, our story leaps east to the Indus Valley of South Asia. For centuries, this civilization lay forgotten. Its cities were buried in mounds and ravaged by floods, until explorers uncovered them in the 20th century. In fact, Britannica notes that the Indus civilization was first identified in 1921 at Harappa, and then in 1922 at Mohenjo-Daro. Today we know it was one of the world's 3 earliest civilizations, flourishing from around 2500 to 1700 BCE alongside Egypt and Mesopotamia. By the mature Harappan period, 2500–2000 BC, 2 major cities dominated: Harappa in modern Punjab, Pakistan, and Mohenjo-Daro, Sindh, Pakistan, each sprawled over a square mile or more, with populations perhaps up to 30 to 40,000 people. Remarkably, both cities were laid out on a grid plan. In Mohenjo-Daro, for example, archaeologists found the ruins of streets running straight for blocks, dividing the city into even islands of city blocks. Each block measured roughly 384 by 228 meters, and buildings were built of standardized fired brick. The city was protected by high walls and an artificial mound. The citadel, raised about 6 to 12 meters above street level. On that citadel mound, the Indus people built their public and ceremonial complexes. At Mohenjo-Daro's citadel, excavators uncovered an enormous public bath, a large brick tank surrounded by colonnaded halls. This great bath suggests communal bathing or ritual cleansing. Nearby were other huge structures, granaries for storing grain, assembly halls, and what might have been temples, all carefully constructed. In Harappa, the citadel likewise stood on a raised platform about 6 meters thick, ringed by a massive brick wall. Beneath this citadel, archaeologists found long brick podiums, interpreted as foundations of granaries, arranged in 2 rows of 6, each 15 by 6 m, and even furnaces for metalworking. In short, the Harappans built large public buildings, warehouses, baths, possible temples, with skilled masonry and planning. Below the citadels lay the lower cities, residential quarters of common people. Here, ordinary Harappans lived in houses of brick, often 2 stories tall. These houses were surprisingly advanced. Most had their own small bathrooms and toilets, with waste channeled into brick-lined drains running along the streets. Archaeologists marveled that Mohenjo-Daro had one of the first known sewage systems in the world. Streets and lanes were laid out with drains, and bricks were plastered with gypsum to resist salty groundwater. In other words, city life in the Indus Valley was remarkably hygienic and orderly. By comparison, thousands of years later, Rome's plumbing would be simpler. No lavish royal tombs or towering palaces have been found at Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro, so we do not know the names of kings or the rulers of this civilization. Instead, power seems to have been bureaucratic and perhaps theocratic. Archaeologists observe evidence of craft specialization, pottery workshops, bead makers, and some social stratification, houses of very different sizes, but no obvious fortress or palace. Trade, however, was highly organized. The Indus cities were trading partners with distant lands. Beads and seals from Harappa show up in Mesopotamian sites. As Britannica notes, Harappan traders even set up colonies in Mesopotamia and Badakhshan, Afghanistan. All Indus towns used a standardized system of weights and measures, and the bricks themselves appear in uniform size across hundreds of kilometers. This remarkable uniformity of weights and measures implies a central administration, regulating commerce and construction. In short, the Indus Valley appears to have been a well-governed and richly interconnected society. Conclusion: echoes of glory and mystery. What links these three lost civilizations, Atlantis, Mesopotamia, Indus, across time and space? In each story, we see the pattern of rise and fall, all built with water. Atlantis on an island amidst the sea, Mesopotamia on river floodplains, Indus cities on monsoon-fed rivers. In each, people harnessed their environment to create riches and technology. Atlantis, in legend, had marble palaces and shimmering orichalcum. Sumer had vast temples and the first writing, and the Harappans had sophisticated city planning and drainage. Each civilization captured imaginations in its time, whether through Homeric tales, king lists, or brick inscriptions, and left a mark for centuries. Yet time and calamity took its toll. Atlantis, if it ever was real, sank in legend. Mesopotamia's empires were shattered by war and conquest. The Indus cities dried and were abandoned as rivers shifted and tribes migrated. One upshot is that all three ended in mystery. With Atlantis, we still ask, was it merely a parable or a hidden history inspired by some ancient disaster? For Mesopotamia and the Indus, archaeology answers many questions, but others remain. We have cracked cuneiform and lost no Mesopotamian word, but the Indus script taunts us unread, and much of Harappan religion and government is speculative. Even in Mesopotamia, miracles like Noah's flood or heroic Gilgamesh persist as mythic memory, reminding us that people of the time recorded their worldview in epic poetry. Despite the gaps, the tangible heritage lives on. Scholars piece together history from ruins and tablets. The clay tablet fragments from Ashurbanipal's library finally brought Sumer to life, while Harappan seals tell of wide trade networks. In a sense, archaeology has resurrected these civilizations. The bricks of Uar and Mohenjo-Daro stand as testimony to human ingenuity long ago. Meanwhile, the story of Atlantis continues to inspire both fanciful theories and serious scholarship about ancient civilizations. In the end, the greatest lesson is humility. Every great city and empire can fade. The fiery story of Atlantis warns that pride and excess can lead to downfall. The real histories of Mesopotamia and the Indus remind us how complex societies can flourish, and yet vanish or transform into new cultures, leaving whispers on stone and clay, whether in myth or in hard clay tablets. The tales of Atlantis, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley captivate us with both splendor and mystery. Each rose from the Earth's possibilities and, in its turn, returned to Earth, leaving behind riddle and legacy for us to explore. And so, as the echoes of Atlantis fade beneath the waves, as the voices of Mesopotamia rest in clay, and as the streets of Harappa remain silent, we are reminded that history is not just about what survives. It's also about what is lost. If you enjoyed this journey through Forgotten Worlds, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. That way, you and I can keep traveling together through myths, ruins, and the mysteries still waiting in the shadows of time. Until our next story, sleep well and dream of the ancient past.